Welcome to Dementia Dialogue. Let's get right into listening to our host Lisa Loisel introduce her guest, Aynsley Moorhouse.
On today's episode of Dementia Dialogue, we continue the Arts and Dementia series with a discussion about the importance of expressive arts and improvisation. My guest today is Aynsley Moorhouse. Aynsley is a mental health clinician, an artist, and she specializes in aging, older age, and dementia. So welcome very much, Aynsley, to the conversation today. I really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
So if we could just start off, can you tell me a little bit about your involvement in theater?
Sure. Yeah, I loved theater from a really young age. I took acting classes as a kid and then ended up studying to be an actor in a master's degree, a master's of fine arts. And I think it never really clicked or worked out for me. And I wasn't really feeling connected to the art form. Like I loved doing it, but something wasn't working for me. So professionally, I suppose, I think I was searching for something more, but that's how I started out.
Okay. So the reason we're having this conversation today is around the importance of, and this whole series really is about the importance of arts in the lives of people living with dementia. Now, I understand through mutual colleagues of ours that you've been involved in some theater work with people living with dementia. So can you maybe tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so like as I was saying, I wasn't really feeling the theater world or the theater life for myself. And when it started clicking was when I started working with people who have dementia. So I worked a number of volunteer positions in long-term care homes and hospitals, using theater arts, and then using improv, like doing improv sessions with people living with dementia. And I really started to, something was just working. I was feeling excited, and the people that I was working with seemed to be feeling excited as well. And I was seeing some like magical moments happening. And that's extended to my work. Now I work with care partners at the Reitman Centre, and now helping care partners as well to use some of the principles of improvisation in terms of connecting with the people that they're caring for, their people with dementia in their lives.
When I think of the arts and theater, and especially knowing and working with people living with dementia for almost 20 years, why improv? It's not something that I would necessarily connect somebody living with dementia, although you did say that you're working with care partners. Have you also worked with people living with dementia doing improv?
Yeah, I started out working with people who have dementia and have sort of moved into working with predominantly with care partners. So why improv? The principles of improv, the ones that are sort of central to improvisation, are, I think, also central to caregiving, effective communication with people living with dementia. The kind of main one, I guess, that comes to mind, or that I use often, is this idea of saying yes and. So saying yes to the person that you're working with, that you're engaging with, that you're having a conversation with, and then saying yes and so building upon what you've been given. So if you're with someone who has dementia and they've said something to you, I think oftentimes a person's response might be to correct or to say like, oh, no. But what can we gain, or what magic can happen if we say yes, and we accept the person, we accept what they've given to us, what their gift is or their offer, and then we can build on it and give something back. And then it can become like a mutual exchange and possibly a moment of deep and perhaps even joyful connection. Another main principle of improv is that is to be like in the moment. And so really focusing on the now and the relationship with the other person as it exists, not how we want it to exist. And I think that concept of being in the moment has driven me since the beginning of like my time working with people who have dementia, to be in the now, because I think in some ways that's what we get with dementia. Like if we don't have as much access, if a person with dementia doesn't have as much access to their past, to their memories, and may not be thinking about the future, I don't want to generalize, but we don't always know, we can really kind of like give into the present moment and be spontaneous. And I will just say, like, another really beautiful principle of improv that I love is to support your partner, to make them look good. And if we're talking to someone who has dementia and we're saying yes and we're, inviting whatever it is that they have to offer, we make them look good, we can, right? We can make them look good, feel good. And I think that's a really respectful way of being.
So when I think about these principles, I think as a care partner, how therapeutic this could be for them, and to almost practice, in a sense, their communication with the person that they're caring for. So what have you seen are the benefits of something like this for people, for the care partners that you're working with?
Oh, right. So I think if a care partner can start to see what the person they're caring for is giving them as a gift, right? Or if they can learn to interact in this sort of improvisational way. And so then it can help create a sense of meaning in the relationship, right? Like if that started to fall away, and I never want to generalize, but we have the opportunity for meaningful interactions, meaningful moments. And it's not all going to be meaningful, and it's not all going to be great. I think being a care partner is hard. There's a lot of loss involved. And I think the invitation is to invite the possibility of joy, moments of connection. So I think in that way, I think it can be therapeutic for the care partner. Because again, a lot of the loss has to do with a lot of the loss for many caregivers has to do with not feeling connected to the person they're caring for. And again, that depends on the nature of the relationship, what it was in the past, and whatnot. But if that's part of the loss, finding moments to connect and to see the person that they're caring for as having something really interesting or unexpected to offer them in the moment, right? And just speaking about the therapeutic nature of this work, I think for both a care partner and the person living with dementia, I think there's the opportunity to see some strengths in the person living with dementia, in what they might be able to offer in an improvisational interaction. And I think that can be of benefit to both people involved.
So when you're doing improv, does it, so I guess maybe we should jump back, and I'd like you to tell me about how a program like this works, like what that looks like, and whether or not, is this something that they do together in dyads, or is this something that you do in just exclusively with either care partners? Or so if you could just tell me a little bit more about the actual program and what that looks like.
Right. So I think you can do both. If you're working with dyads together, I think the benefit is that you can teach both individuals and tools to connect and to take that into their life outside of the group. If you're working with a group of people who have dementia, it's different, right? It's a different experience, I suppose, but there's also an opportunity for a sense of community between the participants in the group, and of course the facilitator or group leader. I mean, I've done it both ways, and it can be beautiful in both ways.
So if I were a participant in this improv group, what would it look like? So I'd come in one day, and what would happen?
So I think, again, it's going to depend on the group and on the nature of the group that you're attending.
So what would be examples of that?
It might be group members come together and engage in sort of typical improvisational exercises that invite spontaneous reactions or responses from the group members. It might be between the group leader and the group member, perhaps building a scene. Oftentimes, like there might be a prompt that you use, so that's like a sentence that could start a scene. Oh, it's a beautiful day outside, and then the participant would respond, and then you can respond to the person. You can also create dyads between group members with those types of exercises. There's also like shorter exercises that you can do, like, that might be gesture focused, right? So showing emotion with your face or your body or your voice. Building a group storytelling can be really beneficial. And what's kind of neat when you're working with people who have dementia in terms of storytelling is that oftentimes you'll end up with like nonlinear stories, which can be so beautiful and unexpected in their own right. I like to think of it as like a postmodern experience or creation. That I've used a technique that was developed by Anne Basting a lot, called time slips. So using a photograph as a prompt for the group to tell a story. I mean, I can remember working with a particular photograph. The one I'm thinking of is like a woman sitting on a bench with leaves on the ground around her, and she's holding a guitar. And the group leader in this like time slips thing is taught to like ask questions, prompts, and not to feed the answers to the person, to the group members. So like, what do you hear? What do you see? Really focused on the senses, which again, I think is really tied into being really trying to live in the moment and experience the world through your senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What do you think happened before? What do you think happened after? And I can remember once just, asking people talk about the crunching of the leaves. And I asked, what song is she singing? And one group member, I don't want to say burst into song, but just started singing quietly. It was an old standard. Forgive me, I cannot remember now what it was, but it was an old standard that, everyone knew, and the other group members started joining in. It was just so spontaneous, right? And it was this spontaneous moment of everyone just saying yes, right? Yes, and to this person in the retelling of the story, which we do. So you build the story and then you retell it. Whenever we came to that part in the story, everyone sang.
Yeah, it sounds like, everybody really felt a connection within the group, like a community.
Well, that's
something
the thing.
like that happens. Yeah.
And I think that's something that I've always felt. And that's what drew me to the theater in the first place was, honestly, I think more than anything was this really strong sense of community that develops, right? Because you're making yourself vulnerable. You're putting yourself out there, agreeing to be creative and, spontaneous or whatever it might be, and to take risks. And when we can create risks together, when we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable with other people, and if we can actually create something as a group, I mean, it's hard to explain, it's somewhat intangible, but there's this really deep connection that can develop.
I completely understand that idea, I guess, from a parent's perspective. My son was in theater for many years, and I have to say his connection with the other actors as he was, creating, different plays was incredible. And I've never seen him connect with anybody in that way before. And it really does, to be vulnerable together really brings you together, because you're able to see deeper into people and you want to get to know them. And yeah, you're just connected on a different level.
Absolutely. And it's so hard to explain, and it's so hard, I think, to be evidence-based about this kind of thing, because again, it is intangible. There's a reason that people get drawn into the life of the theater world, right? There's a reason for that. And I think part of it is like a deep connection to yourself through being creative. And then, as you say, that bond with the other.
That's super exciting. I have seen, I don't know if I can't remember if it was a movie or if it was just a video clip of somebody going through this time slips process, and how powerful. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Great story about just that spontaneous, singing when something comes up, when you leave kind of the door open for whatever people are feeling at that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And not just singing, but gesture or sounds. Like all of those things we can say yes to, and then we can build on them.
Right. And it's so important to live in the moment with people living with dementia. So as you said, and those senses, those are things that I think people living with dementia can remember, right? It's a different area of the brain. And so the smells and the sounds and the tastes of things, those I think persist, and using that as a cue to go deeper into a memory.
And sorry to interrupt.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and I always say, can we take the senses and not try to use them to connect to a memory? Like, can we take the senses and just be, like, just take them for what they are, and be creative, be imaginative, and not try to pull a memory that, of course we want to connect on memory. That's how we could, it is how we connect with other people.
Yeah.
And can we learn to connect in the moment, in our senses? And again, that was really a turning point for me in my career, in my personal life, was realizing, like, because many or most people, like I have dementia in my family as well, and I kind of stumbled upon this idea of letting go of having to talk about the past and just being, and allowing whatever was happening, and allowing for memories that were, quote unquote, wrong, because maybe there's some truth there, right? There's some truth of emotion, or where the person is now.
Right. Yeah.
When I first started doing this work with people who have dementia, and just as an explanation, I think all of, like, my professional training at this time, like 10 years ago, was all in theater and arts. And so that was the natural progression for me, was to move in that direction towards working with people who have dementia. And I stumbled upon an article by Maurice Merleau-Ponty, who is a phenomenological philosopher. And he writes about the value of engaging with the world around us through the senses. And that honestly was such an aha moment for me. It just sort of shifted everything. I learned that, like, I don't need to, or what happens if I let go of control, right? Let go of trying to pull out memories from the past, and really just find value in the senses, in the present moment, in being with. I don't know, I think for me, taking that approach brought meaning, and I think it can bring meaning to engaging with someone with dementia. Something that's so beautiful about engaging in the arts, no matter who we are, is that it involves, like, all parts of ourselves, right? So it involves our imagination, and it involves, like, our intellect, our mind, our body, and our emotions. And so, again, this is a way to connect so deeply and so fully, right, with our whole selves, and wherever our strength might be in any given moment, we can sort of draw on that as our gift.
Well, thank you for all of your thoughts and the work that you're doing with families and people living with dementia. It sounds fabulous. If anybody wants to check out your this particular program, if they want to get involved in this, where can people reach out?
So you have to be a patient of the Reitman Centre.
Okay.
On sign. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We have a website, dementiacarers.com.
Oh, perfect. We'll make sure to include that link in the information on our website. So many amazing points that I really think people are really going to appreciate, in that being able to communicate and, learning how to communicate and taking those principles of improv, so important. I've never heard that before. And I was curious, like, how does improv, how can you learn from that? What do you take away from that? This is very, very fascinating, and I love it.
It's so interesting to me because to me, it's just like, it's so obvious. It's like, of course, it's perfect. It fits perfectly. We need to learn, right? And like, and I feel like once we sort of make that connection, it's like, oh, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Of course. Yeah. It's like light bulb moment. Of course, that's exactly what it's doing, those principles.
Thanks to Aynsley for sharing her passion and vision of how improv theater can both enliven people affected by dementia and help care partners learn new strategies. You can learn more about Aynsley's practice at the Reitman Centre at Sinai Health Toronto by checking out the show note for this episode on our website. We have also posted 2 articles on improv and dementia. I've learned so much from this series on the arts and dementia. Our last episode in the series will be released in late May and will feature Lisa in conversation with Chris Wynn, a documentary filmmaker and cultural observer. The previous arts episodes are grouped together on our website, dementiadialogue.ca. Last week we released our second episode in our Francophone series. Please let your Francophone contacts know about it. The Francophone series is sponsored by the Canadian Consortium on Neurodegeneration in Aging. Our next English language episode is the third in our Young Onset series, curated and hosted by the Brain Exchange. If you missed the first 2 episodes with the Deneen family, I urge you to listen to them. If you want to have our episodes delivered into your inbox, write us at dementia.dialogue@lakeheadu.ca. Thanks to the Centre for Education and Research on Aging and Health at Lakehead University, our institutional partner, and to the Public Health Agency of Canada for its financial support. My name is David Harvey.